The fire was out before we got there. That should have been fine. It wasn't. I'm a firefighter out of a small department in eastern Tennessee. Our county sits right where the Cumberland Plateau flattens out before dropping into the valley. One station, 12 full-timers, the rest volunteer. I'd been on the job about 6 years when this call came in. It was a Wednesday night in late November. Cold, not freezing, but the kind of damp cold that gets through your gear and sits in your knees for the rest of the shift. We'd already run 2 calls that night, a kitchen fire off Route 70 that turned out to be bacon grease, and a brush check on a property line dispute out past Crossville. Nothing serious, the kind of shift you go home from without thinking about it. The third call came in around 11:40. Dispatch said smoke check residential. A neighbor down the road had seen light flickering through the trees and smelled something. The address was on County Road 89, a 2-lane I knew well enough. Mostly older properties, a few double-wides, woodlots between each lot so you couldn't always see one house from the next. Old wood construction, a lot of elderly residents. We were there in 9 minutes. The fire was already out when we pulled up. Not smoldering, not winding down. Out, the kind of out that takes time. The house was a single-story, maybe 70 years old. Clapboard siding, a covered porch, a propane tank on a gravel pad off to the left. One room at the back right corner was blackened, window gone, siding scorched up to the roofline, but the rest of the structure was intact. Whatever burned had burned fast and then just stopped. My captain, a man named Reese, walked the exterior with me. We had flashlights and hand tools. The air smelled like wet char and something underneath it I couldn't name yet, faint and sweet, carried on the cold. The neighbor who'd called it in stood at the edge of the gravel driveway in a canvas Carhartt jacket, arms crossed, breath coming out in short white puffs. He said he'd seen the glow around 10:30. That was over an hour before we arrived. Dispatch had logged the call at 11:22. Reese and I looked at each other. Neither of us said anything yet. We knocked at the front door, no answer. The porch light was on, a bare bulb in a fixture that hummed faintly in the cold. A pair of work boots sat next to the door, toes pointed out toward the yard like someone had just stepped out of them. That detail stuck with me. People don't leave their boots like that. You step out of boots and they fall sideways or you kick them toward the wall. These were parallel, placed. Reese tried the handle, unlocked. We announced ourselves and went in. The house smelled like old wood and kerosene. Not the heavy char smell you get from a serious structure fire, that wet, acrid bite that stays in your sinuses for days. This was thinner. And underneath the kerosene, that sweet smell from outside was stronger in here, like burnt plastic or melted rubber, but not quite either of those. I've smelled a lot of things on this job. I still couldn't place it. I didn't like not being able to place it. The living room was clean, not neat clean, like surfaces had been wiped. The couch had a blanket folded over the back of it in a way that looked deliberate. No dishes, no mail on the table, no coffee cup. A small lamp in the corner threw yellow light across bare wood floors. No rug, no scatter of shoes or newspapers, none of the ordinary debris that collects in a room where someone actually lives. People live in their houses. You can feel it when they do. This room felt like a photograph of a room. Somewhere down the hall a clock was ticking. I didn't notice it yet. The silence in that living room was too even. No refrigerator hum, no furnace cycling, no creak of the house settling in the cold, just us moving through it. We moved toward the back, toward the burned section. The door to that room was closed. I opened it. The burn was contained to one corner, a wooden chair, mostly ash now, its frame collapsed into itself. A small side table, some kind of fabric melted and fused to the floor around the chair's footprint in a rough ring. The texture of it was wrong, stiff and ribbed where it had cooled. The walls above the chair were blackened in a cone shape, spreading up toward the ceiling, which was blistered but unbroken. The window was gone, just a frame with jagged glass teeth around the edges. The cold air coming through carried a smell that was sharper in here. Kerosene and something organic underneath that. I've seen a lot of fire patterns. The spread tells you where it started and how it moved. This one started at the chair, low, concentrated, then up. That's not how house fires start on their own. Reese was behind me. He said quietly, "That's not accidental." I was already thinking the same thing, but that wasn't even the part that bothered me most. There was a hospital bracelet on the floor near the door, face down. I picked it up with my glove and turned it over. The name on it was a woman's. The admission date was 3 weeks prior. The discharge date was 4 days ago. Somewhere in the house a clock was ticking. I could hear it now that we'd both gone quiet. A steady mechanical tick from down the hall, unhurried, the only thing in the house that felt like it belonged. We backed out and called it in. Reese got on the radio and requested law enforcement and the county fire investigator. I went back outside and talked to the neighbor. His name was Gerald. He was in his 60s, lived about a quarter-mile down County Road 89, had driven up in a Silverado when he saw our lights. He said the property belonged to a man named Carl, lived there alone as far as Gerald knew, in his 50s, kept to himself. Gerald hadn't seen Carl's truck in 2 or 3 days. He pointed to an empty strip of gravel alongside the house where the truck usually sat. The gravel was stained dark, motor oil or something like it. There were tire tracks in the soft dirt at the edge, recent enough that they hadn't filled with rain. I asked him what kind of truck. Old Ram, he said, dark blue, dented front fender on the driver's side. We waited. The temperature had dropped another degree or two since we'd arrived. The burned-out window at the back of the house was a dark rectangle in the beam of the engine's floodlight. The cold coming off the structure had a specific flatness to it, like the heat debt had been fully paid, and now the building was colder than it should be. The sheriff's deputy showed up first, then the fire investigator, a woman named Patricia, who drove up from the next county in a state-issued Tahoe. She walked through with us and didn't say much until she'd been in the burned room for about 4 minutes by herself. When she came out, she was holding her clipboard, not writing on it, just holding it. She said there's no accidental ignition point. Nothing fell, nothing shorted. The origin is the chair. I said, could be the person in the chair. She looked at me. There's no person in the chair, no remains. She paused. But that fabric on the floor isn't any upholstery I can identify. It's synthetic, heavy gauge. Zip ties. I didn't say it out loud, but the thought was there, and once I had it I couldn't let it go. The ribbed texture of that fused material, the rough ring of it around the chair's footprint, the way it had pooled rather than spread. The deputy walked the rest of the house and found a back bedroom that didn't match the rest of the place. Mattress on the floor, a plastic water bottle, empty, cap still on, a woman's sneaker, just one near the closet. Inside the closet, scratches on the door frame, low down, like someone sitting on the floor raking their nails across the wood. The scratches were layered, some shallow, some deeper, grouped in short, frantic strokes about 18 inches up from the floor. I went cold when he showed me that, genuinely cold, in a way that had nothing to do with the November air. I stood there looking at those scratches, at the height of them, at what it said about the position someone had to be in to make them. I held that thought as long as I could stand to hold it, then I walked back out into the hallway. The hospital bracelet, the back bedroom, the scratches, the burns. None of it was what this call was dispatched as. This was not a smoke check. This had not been a smoke check for a long time before we arrived. Patricia called in a second unit. The deputy got on with his sergeant. I stood on the porch in the November dark and listened to the radio traffic shift from routine to something else. You know it when you hear it. The dispatcher's voice tightens. They start over-enunciating. The rhythm changes. That's when you know it's real. Gerald was still standing at the edge of the driveway. I watched him hear it. I watched him go still. Reese came and stood beside me. He didn't say anything. 15 years on the job, he'd seen things. He just stood there with his hands in his jacket pockets, looking at the tree line, his breath steady and slow. We stayed until almost 3 in the morning. By the time we cleared, the cold had settled all the way in, and there was frost on the engine's windshield. The follow-up came across the station's incident log about 6 weeks later. I read it on a Tuesday between calls. Carl was found. His truck had been spotted at a Love's Travel stop off Interstate 40 near Cookeville, about 36 hours after our call. He was gone before anyone could stop him. The woman whose name was on the hospital bracelet was found alive at a property connected to a relative of Carl's about 40 miles east. I don't know more than that. The report didn't say more than that. What I know is what I saw, a room set like a stage, a chair at the center of it, a door that nobody had called us about until a neighbor noticed light in the trees an hour after whatever happened. And boots on a porch placed too carefully, toes pointing out toward the road like whoever left them was planning to come back. I still run calls. I still like this job mostly. But I notice things I didn't used to notice. The placement of objects, whether a room feels lived in or arranged, the difference between a house that's clean and a house that's been cleaned. Some calls change the way you look at everything after. That one changed mine. On the second morning, the voice calling my dad's name was my dad's voice, but my dad was sitting right next to me. I want to be clear about that before anything else. I was not half asleep. I was not imagining things. My dad, Ray, was on the platform beside me. I could feel his shoulder against mine. I could hear him breathing. And the voice came from down in the hollow, maybe 60 yards out, low and easy, like he was just calling across a parking lot. It said his name, his full name, Raymond. Nobody calls my dad Raymond, not even my grandmother. I'm going to back up. My name is Cal, I'm 31. I've been hunting whitetail since I was 12, mostly in western Pennsylvania, Clarion County, the same ridge my dad hunted with his own father. We have a camp there, it's not much. A converted deer camp, 2 bunks, a wood stove, a shelf of paperbacks nobody ever finishes. We stop at the Eaton Park in Clarion on the way in every year and get eggs and bad coffee, and my dad talks too loud and I don't mind it at all. That trip it was just the 2 of us. My uncle had a bad knee. We drove up in my dad's F-250, parked on the gravel pull-off on Route 68, and hiked the half-mile into camp Friday afternoon. I was running a Browning X-Bolt in 308. My dad had his old Remington 700, which is older than me. We each had a stand. Mine was a hang-on about 16 feet up a red oak on the east side of the ridge. His was a ladder stand maybe 200 yards further north, looking down into a creek bottom. We'd hunted those stands for years. We knew every branch, every game trail, every wind shift. Saturday was cold and still. I passed on a small 6-point. My dad never fired. We came back for lunch, went back out at 3, saw nothing. Normal first day. Sunday morning is when it started. We were up at 4:30, drove the 2-track in the dark, hiked in by headlamp and settled into our stands before 6. I remember the cold that morning. My toes went numb inside my boots before legal shooting light, that hard, dry cold with no wind in it. My dad had climbed up to my stand with me. His ladder stand had ice on the rails and he didn't trust it in the dark. We were crowded, but we'd done it before. 2 grown men on a platform built for one. He was to my left, close enough that I felt every time he shifted his weight. Around 7 I heard deer moving in the leaves below. I eased my rifle up. Nothing came into the lane. The sound moved off east. Then it got quiet. Not normal quiet, the kind where you realize the squirrels stopped, the birds stopped, everything at once like someone hit a switch. My dad tapped my arm once, he'd heard it too. We waited. Then I heard footsteps. A slow, deliberate crunch in the leaves below the oak. Not a deer, the spacing was wrong, too even, too slow, like someone trying to walk quietly and not quite managing it. I leaned over the edge and looked down. Nothing, just leaf litter and dark oak trunks going off into gray morning light. The crunching stopped. We stayed up there another hour. The woods never came back to normal. No squirrels, no crows, just that flat silence sitting over everything. When we climbed down, I found boot prints, 2 of them clear in a soft patch of ground at the base of the tree. Deep tread, pointed north. They weren't mine, my boots leave a different pattern, and they weren't my dad's. His prints were already there from when we'd climbed up in the dark, pointing toward the tree, toward the ladder steps. These were pointing away. They were on top of the leaf fall we'd kicked up climbing in. They were made after us. My dad looked at them a long time. He said someone must have come by to check out our stand. I didn't argue. We hunted until noon. My dad shot a doe around 10:30, clean double lung. We tagged her, field dressed her near the creek, and hung her from the meat pole back at camp. Everything normal, good hunt. Monday morning we went back out. My dad's rails were dry by then. He went to his ladder stand. I went to my oak. We split up around 5:30. The silence came back around 6:45. Same thing, everything stops, that flat, pressed-down quiet. Then I heard something walking the ridge, moving north to south, paralleling my stand at maybe 40 yards, too heavy for a coyote, walking upright. I couldn't see it through the brush, but I could track it by sound, slow, deliberate, then it stopped. It was directly below me. I held still, my rifle was across my knees. I did not look down. Then the voice came. Raymond. Not shouted, not whispered, just said, easy and flat, my dad's voice, his exact cadence, the way he'd say a name if he was looking for you in a hardware store. My dad was 200 yards north of me. I know because 3 seconds later my earpiece crackled. We wear little 2-way earpieces during the hunt, cheap Motorola units we've used for years. My dad's voice came through, quiet and careful. He said something had just called my name from the direction of my stand. We both went still, I don't know for how long, 5 minutes, maybe 10. Then I looked down. At the base of my tree, in the shadow of the root flare, something was crouched. I couldn't make out a full shape. What I could see was a pale oval at the top of it, a face, pointed up at me. It didn't move, it didn't make a sound. I keyed the radio. I told my dad I needed him to walk south toward me, making noise, talking out loud, take his time, don't run. I watched the shape the whole time he walked. When he was about halfway to me, maybe 100 yards out, it moved. It didn't stand up. It sort of unfolded sideways and went into the brush to the east. Fast, too fast for something that had been crouching still, and no sound when it hit the brush. Nothing. My dad reached my tree. He looked up at me. I looked down at him. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Then he looked at the ground. The prints were back, same tread, fresh ones, pointing east this time into the thick stuff. I climbed down. We walked back to camp, not fast. Hunters don't run in the woods. Running makes noise, and noise tells things where you are. We walked at a normal pace and talked about nothing the whole way. My dad told me about a buck he'd seen at first light. I told him what the doe might dress out at. Normal talk, loud enough to fill the space around us. We got to camp. I packed my gear. My dad didn't argue. He packed his. We loaded the F-250, got the doe off the meat pole, and drove to Route 68 without stopping. There's a Sheetz in Emlenton about 20 minutes south. We stopped there. My dad got coffee. I sat in the truck and didn't say much. He came back out, handed me a cup, and sat in the driver's seat. He stared at the windshield for a while. He said, "That's the second time something's done that on this ridge." I looked at him. He told me about a hunt from when he was 19. Just him and his father, my grandfather, who died before I was born. Same ridge, early November. His father heard his own name come out of the dark below his stand, not my dad's voice, his own voice, his father's voice coming up from the ground. He climbed down and found a set of boot prints at the base of the tree. They matched his own boots almost exactly, but the stride was longer. My grandfather never went back to that ridge. My dad did for 30 years. He'd figured his father had spooked himself. He didn't say that anymore. We drove home without stopping again. I called my wife from the road and told her we were coming back early. She asked if everything was okay. I said the hunting was slow. I called the game warden's office in Clarion County the following week, not to report anything specific. I just asked if there had been any incidents on that ridge, poachers, strange activity. The warden was a woman named Terry. She was professional and patient. She asked me what I meant by strange. I told her the voice, the shape, the prints. There was a long pause, not the pause of someone thinking, the pause of someone deciding. She said she'd look into it and get back to me. She never called back. I've gone over it a lot since then. I know what a hunter sounds like moving through the woods. I know what a deer sounds like. I know what people do when they're lost or turned around or trespassing. I've been in these woods my whole life. What was at the base of my tree didn't move like any of those things. It didn't react like any of those things. And the voice. If you've ever heard your own father's voice come out of the wrong place, the wrong direction, with nobody behind it, you don't need me to explain why that undoes something in you. I'm still not sure what I saw. I'm not going to pretend I am. We still go out every year. We just hunt the south face of the ridge now. When the second man got in my back seat, the first one hadn't said a word to me about it. My name is Derek. I drive for Lyft in Indianapolis. I've been doing it long enough to know the rhythms of a Friday night, the kinds of rides that are fine and the kinds that aren't. I drive a 2019 Camry. Clean, AC works, charger cable in the back. I kept my rating above 4.8 and I was careful about who I picked up. That's the part that still gets me. I thought I was careful. The ping came in around 12:40. Rider name was Marcus, 4.6 rating. I noticed it. I talked myself past it. The pickup was on the east side off 38th Street in front of a closed laundromat. Drop-off listed on Emerson Avenue about 6 miles south, 6 minutes away. I accepted it. It had rained earlier, one of those short, hard summer rains that leaves the pavement slick and steaming. The streets were mostly empty. The kind of empty where you can hear your own tires on the asphalt. I had my windows up, climate control set to 70, the faint smell of pine from the air freshener clipped to my vent. I've gone back over that ride so many times. I remember every detail. When I pulled up, one guy came off the curb and got in the back, gray hoodie. He smelled like cigarette smoke, not fresh smoke, the stale kind that lives in fabric for days. He didn't say anything when he sat down. No hello, no nod, nothing. I said good evening the way I always do. He looked at his phone. I confirmed the destination and pulled out. The first 2 minutes were quiet. I've had plenty of quiet rides. I had the radio low, a sports station, just background noise. We were heading south on Sherman Drive and everything looked exactly like every other late Friday run I'd ever done. Then I turned onto 34th and he told me to stop. Not at the destination. We were still 4 miles out. He just said, "Pull over here for a second." I slowed down, but I didn't stop. I asked if he needed a different drop-off. He said no, he just needed a second. I pulled over near a dark stretch between a check cashing place and a chain-link fence, the kind that runs along a vacant lot 8 feet tall, padlocked gate, no foot traffic. The nearest lit sign was half a block behind us. I left my hazards on out of habit. The orange flash of them on the wet pavement is one of those details I can't shake. The back door opened. A second man got in. Neither of them said anything to me. The new guy sat right behind my seat. He was bigger, heavier, wearing a dark jacket with a zipper pull that hung loose. He didn't look at me. He just settled in like he'd been expecting a seat. I could feel the shift in the car's weight. I could feel the change in the air, something close, pressurized. My stomach dropped. I stayed quiet. I pulled back onto the road and kept driving. I told myself it was nothing. A friend needed a ride. It happens. But then Marcus said it. "Hey, turn off the app." I said, "What?" "The app, turn it off. I'll Venmo you the rest." I kept my eyes on the road. I said I wasn't able to do that. It was against policy. The app needed to stay on for the whole ride. My voice stayed level. I still don't know how. Neither of them responded. Then I heard it. A zipper, the slow pull of a zipper on a bag somewhere behind my seat. Not fast, not careless, deliberate. The kind of deliberate that means someone is taking their time on purpose. That was the moment, that specific sound. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Something locked into place in my chest, something older than conscious thought, and every instinct I had said the same thing at once. Do not let this car stop. Do not give them a reason to hurry. Do not flinch, just drive. The sports radio kept murmuring, an analyst talking about the Colts secondary. I remember thinking how strange it was, this completely ordinary sound sitting on top of whatever was happening in my back seat. I focused on it for a second, just to keep my breathing even, just to keep my foot from pressing the gas and giving away how afraid I was. I made a turn that wasn't on the route, east onto a cross street. I acted like I hadn't noticed I'd done it. Neither of them said anything. I kept my speed steady, both hands on the wheel. I needed them to see that I was relaxed, just some guy doing his job on a wet Friday night. And there in the next block was a Circle K, the one on the corner of 34th and Sherman. Its lights were blazing, that flat white fluorescent light that makes everything look like the inside of a hospital. A semi-truck was parked out front, big enough to block half the lot, 2 other cars at the pumps. A woman in a yellow jacket standing near the door talking on her phone, people visible through the glass at the register. I pulled in fast, faster than I should have. The tires made a short squeal on the wet concrete. I put the car in park next to the fuel pumps, directly under the overhead canopy lights, as bright as I could get it. I said, "I need to stop here. I'm going to need you guys to get out." Marcus said, "What?" "I'm ending the ride here. You can request another driver." Nobody moved for about 3 seconds. That was the longest 3 seconds I can remember. The woman in the yellow jacket glanced over at my car. I was aware of her the way you're aware of a lifeline. Then Marcus said something low to the other guy, just a few words, almost under his breath. I couldn't make it out. I had my hand near the door handle. I was watching the pump lights and the people through the store window. I was ready to get out and start yelling if the door behind me moved even an inch. They got out. The big guy didn't say a word. He moved slowly, without urgency, like a man who had decided to allow this. Marcus gave me one look through the window before he walked away. Flat, completely flat. No anger, no frustration, no surprise, just looking. The way you look at something you're memorizing rather than reacting to. They walked around the side of the building and were gone. I sat there for a full minute. The woman in the yellow jacket had gone inside. The semi idled. I could smell diesel faint through the vents. My hands were still on the wheel. I made myself set them in my lap and breathe. Then I called Lyft support. The woman on the line was patient. She took the account name, the ride ID, my location, and what had happened. She said she'd flag the account and a specialist would follow up within 24 hours, maybe 4 minutes, that whole call. I also called the non-emergency line for Indianapolis Metro Police. An officer came out about 20 minutes later. I showed him the dashcam footage. I run a Vantru N2 Pro on my windshield, front and rear both. He watched the rear cabin footage twice. He took the SD card and gave me a case number. He said to follow up with Lyft about the account. I drove home. I didn't take another ride that night. 2 days later, I posted in a local Indianapolis drivers group online. 3 hours after I posted, another driver commented. He said he'd had a ride from that same account name 6 weeks earlier, different part of town over on East Washington Street. His ride had ended at an actual address, no incident. But the guy had asked him twice to turn off the app, and a second person had been waiting at a stop who never actually got in. His gut told him something was wrong. He'd kept driving to the listed destination, and both riders got out without incident. But he'd logged it with Lyft, and nothing had come of it. That Marcus account was still active when I reported it. I got one email from Lyft's trust and safety team. They said they'd reviewed my report and taken appropriate action. That was it. The officer who took my dashcam card followed up once. He said they'd reviewed the footage and it was part of an ongoing inquiry. He couldn't share details. I haven't heard from him since. I don't know what they were planning. Maybe it was a robbery. Maybe the bag held something and the plan was to make the car disappear from the app before they made their stop. Maybe I'm wrong about all of it. Maybe it was two guys trying to avoid surge pricing and the zipper sound was nothing. But Marcus's face through that window stays with me. No expression at all, just looking, like he was filing something away for later. I still drive. I scaled back my hours. I don't take rides past midnight anymore. I check ratings harder than I used to. Anything under 4.5, I pass. Any pickup on a dark stretch that doesn't match the area, I pass. And I added one more rule. If anyone in my car tells me to turn off the app, the ride is over. Wherever we are, I don't negotiate. I don't explain it twice. I find the nearest lit parking lot and I stop. The app is the only thing between you and a car full of strangers with no record you were ever there. The second someone wants that gone, you already know enough. I haven't driven that stretch of 38th Street since.